everybody. Good to have you all here. It is it is time for our special talk with Roberto Watanabe. We keep going with the book Heaven and Hell, and probably today is the last topic from the Heaven and Hell, which is the angels and demons. And the following call, Roberto will start to talk about Genesis. So, apologies for those who was expecting this last Tuesday, but we had some technical problems, and now it's sorted out. And also, I apologize for those who are here and we are late. We are 5 minutes, 10 minutes late now, but we made it. We made it. Roberto, good evening, my friend. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Stefan. Hello,
Good,
everybody.
good, good. So, since we are late, I will not eat more of your time. Here's the presentation. Break a leg, my friend.
Okay, thank you. Well, today we are going to see the last presentation from the book Heaven and Hell, as Stefan said, right? So, um, in the topic today is angels and demons according to Spiritism. So, first of all, I thank you to be following us in this presentation of this book. And then let's start with this issue now. So let's see first the concept of angels according to the church, the Catholic concept, and then according to Spiritism. So angels, according to the church, what we Kardec writes in the chapter 10 of this Heaven and Hell book, is that the belief in angels is an essential part of the church's dogmas. First, such a dogma states that there is only one true God, eternal and infinite. So that's we spirits are we agree with that. But then the dogma also says that at the beginning of the time, God created two natures, the spiritual and the corporeal. Uh, we can think about soul and body, the angelic and the mundane. And now we have a different approach here, right? Spiritual, angelic means a kind of a being who is only spiritual, has no corporeal part in it. And mundane is like us humans, that we are soul, but we are having this body, right? Where we are incarnated. And then the dogma says that as a link between the two, spiritual and corporeal, God formed later the human nature, which are us, composed of a body and soul. And the soul is great and noble, the dogma says, but is served by fragile organs, means our body, right, which is exposed to diseases, to accidents, to death. And such fragile organs are limited in direction and strength. By the other hand, angels, according to the dogma, are purely spirit beings. They are endowed with every virtue and all knowledge, without having ever done anything to acquire it. It means that, according to Church's dogma, God has created angels already perfect. So that's what it's saying here, right? So we'll see what Spiritism thinks about it, right? So of course, for those who have studied Spiritism, know that this is not what the Spiritism believe. And then angels are always mentioned in the Old and in the New Testament. Uh, they are God ministers to impose His will, the will of God, and announce future events. We can think, for example, about the angels that came to Mary to announce her that she would give birth to Jesus, right? So that was an angel who announced to communicate her about that. And angels are also nearly always instruments of God's justice and mercy. So they are kind of representatives, right, of God. And they also are fully and simultaneously at all points and in all parts of the world. Means that they can be everywhere at the same time, and they without any effort they see what they must know because they are perfect, right? And they are always in direct relation with the object of their thought. Meaning that, for example, we humans, we have our reasoning, we have our mind, and if we want to know some object, we must approach such object and then observe, analyze. We must approach gradually, right, to know such objects. In the case of the angels, they don't have these steps, right, to know the object. They know directly the object. It's a kind of a faculty that we humans we still have to develop in ourselves, according to some spiritist authors, which is the intuition, which is the faculty through which we see directly the object. And the angels have already that, right? And it is part of their nature. So what is the concept of angels, the view of how Spiritism view such a concept of angels? So we say that there is no doubt that there are beings endowed with all the qualities attributed to angels, and that beings that have achieved perfection, that can be everywhere at the same time, which are the ministers of God. So that's Spiritists agree with that. But that doesn't mean that they are privileged creatures who were destined to supreme and eternal bliss at their creation. So this last part is important, right? At their creation, meaning that we Spiritists uh, do not believe that God has created angels already perfect at their creation. Angels or pure spirits, for we in Spiritism, we instead of angels, we call pure spirits. And so such pure spirits are no more than human souls that have ascended the spirit hierarchy toward the perfection. So meaning that we as human souls, in some point in the future, well, far from now, we will reach this condition of a pure spirit, right? So God does not create any being which is as a pure spirit or angel already, right? Already perfect. So that's what Spiritism says. And souls or spirits, which are us, we are created simple and ignorant. We see that in the book, Spiritist book also. And so we are created without knowledge or awareness of good and evil, meaning that by the time we are created, we still don't have, for example, the moral conscience. That is something that will come later. And but such spirits, which are us, that were created simple and ignorant, we are capable of acquiring all that we lack through labor. Labor meaning through our own effort. And the goal, which is perfection to all of us, is the same for everybody. And the speed at which we achieve such goal, perfection, depends on our free will. Huh? So that meaning that depending on each one of us, which we through our free will, we decided to go faster, we will achieve perfection faster. If we decided to go slower, then we will take more time, right, to achieve perfection. And but we develop little by little, and we perfected ourselves through reincarnation. This is a basic principle, right, of spiritism. Until we reach the state of a pure spirit or angel. Why is that? Because when we, by the time we achieve the state, the condition of a pure spirit, then we don't need to reincarnate anymore. Then we will live as a spirit only. Huh? We don't have reincarnating bodies. So that's what's being said here. And so that the angels are humans, souls who have attained the degree of the perfection, and that everybody of us are capable of. And of course, when we achieve such a goal, then we will enjoy the promised bliss in all its fullness. Right? So that is the condition here. So uh, in summary, right, we say in Spiritism that the angels or pure spirits are no more than human souls that had uh, have through its own effort achieved the goal, which is perfection. And now let's take a look at another concept here, right? Demons. And we will do here the same, right? We will see demons according to the vision of the church and then according to Spiritism. So what is the origin of the belief in demons, right? So what we say, what we see in history is that throughout time, since the ancient times, demons have represented a prominent role in various theogonies. Right? What is a theogony? Theo means God. Right? That is a Greek word which means God. And goni comes from the Greek word genos, which means origin. Right? So a theogony talks about the origin of the gods. And so the primitive humans, far on the past, they believed in an extra human power because they suffered from physical harm, and such physical harm was what impressed them most, and then attributed such power of causing us physical harm to extra human power, some being which would be beyond the human beings. And thus, in primitive worship, the ceremonies in honor of a malefic power, malefic because he would cause us physical harm, were always more numerous. Well, it meaning that in the ceremonies in primitive worship, the goal was to calm down, right, such malefic power in order for them to doesn't cause any more physical harm to us, and meaning that the base of such ceremonies were fear, right, rather than gratitude. For example, today when we pray and we pray uh, as we showing gratitude for God, for example, right? In the ancient times, they if they prayed, it was more caused by fear of such extra human powers that could cause physical harm upon them. And only later, when the moral sentiments of good and evil, which means the moral consciousness, developed in us as humans, and then we could foresee spirituality. So then we could, let's say, conceptualize um, a good, a beneficial power, right? Not only the malefic power. And so this is the origin, right, of this idea of beings who are devoted to evil. That is the concept of demons. Right? And since there was an incessant struggle between good and evil, and since one could not rationally believe that evil could derive from benevolent power, then it was concluded that there was two rival powers governing the world. So what's being said here is that as the primitive humans, they saw this kind of a struggle between good and evil, not only in nature but even inside themselves, and they could not believe that an evil power uh, would derive from a benevolent power. So then they conceptualized two different powers, right, governing the world. So the good power and the evil power. And then again, we have this idea of the malefic power, the idea of demons. Huh? And just as every sovereign must have his or her ministers, all religions have believed in secondary powers, good or evil spirits. So, meaning that there were two rival powers. Huh? We can think about, we will see soon. We will can think about the God as the power of the good power, and then we can think about the Satan as the evil power. But then God has his minister, right? As we saw, which are the angels, and Satan also has, let's say, his ministers, who are the demons, right? So because of that, the doctrine of demons has its origin in such ancient belief, right? In the two principles of good and evil. For example, if you study the Persian religion, the ancient Persian religion, we see that there were two gods in their belief, a, a, a god of light and a god of darkness, right? Good and evil. So this is what we is being said here, right? And so Satan, which would be the who would be the chief or king of the demons, according to church dogma, right? Not according to Spiritism. So Satan would be a real entity who practices only evil. Satan is devoted to evil, right? Where God practices only good. But then a question arises, right? Has Satan existed throughout eternity like God? If yes, then it would have been we know, yes, he, right? This not we here is he. Then he would be non-created and therefore equal to God. So if Satan was not created by God, then he would have the same power of God. As God is a non-created being, Satan also would be a non-created being. In such case, God would no longer be unique, because one of the attributes of God is uniqueness. There is only one God, which has, for example, as another attribute, the omnipotence. Right? If there is another power, evil power in this case, which is Satan, which is powerful as God, then God would not be omnipotent. Right? So this idea of Satan destroys, right, much of the attributes of God. And then, but we could think about, well, what if Satan came later? Huh? So it was created by somebody. Huh? Well, in this case, it would be a creature, right? But then God would have created the evil, which it doesn't make much sense. Right? So this is the argument here. No? In such case, God would have created a being devoted exclusively to evil, and therefore another attribute of God, yeah, right, which is the infinite goodness and mercy, would be destroyed here. Right? God would not be infinitely good because he would God who would have created an evil being. Right? So in general, in summary, right, what Kardec is argument here that this idea of Satan does not make any sense, right? And the same applies to the evil beings called demons, right? Because if God did not create demons, then they would be as powerful as God. And if God created them, then God would have created the evil beings, which it doesn't make sense. It doesn't doesn't combine, right, with his infinite goodness and mercy, kindness and mercy. So, church belief regarding demons is that God did not create them perverse and evil. So that is something interesting here, right? So uh, God here, the church believe that demons uh, were created by God. Satan did not, but demons were created by God. But they were not created perverse and evil. They were created actually demons at the beginning. They were angels, so they were created perfect. Right? So that is the dogma, right? That the church defends. So God make the demons equal in every way to the sublime spirits, to angels, right? Who are in the state of glory and bliss. However, they rebelled, right, against God. They became unworthy through a senseless and audacious revolt against God. And then, but if you both, then the argument here is that if you both Satan and demons had been angels, they would have been perfect. And if they were perfect, then they would not rebelled against God, right? So it's a kind of a contradiction here. So being perfect, as here Kardec asked, right? Being perfect, how they could have failed to the point of not recognizing the authority of God? If they were perfect, he would never do that, right? To rebel against God. So in some sense here, Kardec is already, let's say, deconstructing, right, such idea of demons. Now let's see the concept of demons according to Spiritism, right? So what Spiritism says? It says that there are spirits at every degree of moral and intellectual evolution. We see there in this Spiritist book that there are three levels there, right, which Kardec lists there, right? There are the imperfect spirits. Then above such imperfect spirits, we have the good spirits, and then above the good, you have the pure spirits, which are the same as angels, right? So we as spirits, we all as spirits, we are in some point of this scale, right? The hierarchy, and within the lowest order, which is the order of the imperfect spirits, there are spirits who still have a profound propensity to evil, and who and even take pleasure in doing evil. Right. So these uh, could be called demons, right? If you like. But the Spiritism does not label them as such. Right? We don't say that spirit which is still imperfect and have pleasure in doing evil, we do not call them demons. We call them imperfect spirits, right? Which one day in the future they will progress. So that's what is being said here. Because if we call them demons, then it means that such imperfect spirit would stay in this condition forever, which does not make sense because it's against the law of progress, which is one of the basic principles of Spiritism. That's why Kardec says here, right? Because the called some imperfect spirit as demons leads to the idea of a creation apart from humankind. So such imperfect spirits would not be humans, and they would be beings with an essentially wicked nature. So they would never be good, right? So they would always be evil. So that's not according to uh, basic principles of Spiritism. In the case, the law of evolution or law of progress. So then we in Spiritism we say that such uh, kind of spirits who still take pleasure on doing evil, they just are spirits still imperfect. And although located at the bottom of the scale, the spirit scale, they will nevertheless ascend it sometime, right, in the future. So that's the vision of the spiritism. Yeah? And they are also subject to the law of progress due to their aptitude for progress, but they are not forced to progress against their will. So that's something that we learn in Spiritism. We are created simple and ignorant, as we have seen already today, and but we will reach perfection some day in the future. But we will reach such perfection according to our free will. That's what being said here, right? Uh, the imperfect spirits are not forced to progress against their will. They will progress according to their will. And if progress were obligatory, there would be no merit in it. So suppose that a spirit decides that he or she doesn't want to progress, right? So no, but it's obligatory to progress. In such case, there would be no free will, and therefore there would be no merit, so, in deciding to progress or not. So and God wills for all of us, Kardec says, to enjoy the merit of our deeds. So meaning that we are only progress when we decided to, right? So according to our free will, and therefore the most highly evolved angels have earned their degree as all the others will by traversing the course common to all. Meaning that if we that we all now on earth, right, which are still imperfect, some let's say some thousands of years in the future, we achieve the condition of a pure spirit, that will be our merit because it will depend on our free will and not something that anything that obliges us, right, to reach that condition for pure spirit. We reach such situation by our own decision. So that's what is being said here. In in summary, in spiritism there are no concept of demons, right? We just say that all that exist are evil spirits, as well as we say that in spiritism they are not angels as being already created perfect, right? But we say that there are pure spirits that are no more than human souls that have, through their own effort, reached the condition of perfection. Right? So now I will see here some examples of earthly expiation because the heaven and hell book. In the first part we have the theoretical part, right? And the second part we have let's say the practical part where Kardec brings us many kind of examples, right, of spiritist communication, right? They are describing their situation after death, right? So, and then what Kardec wants to show there in the second part of the book is that our condition in the life after death will depend on what we do now here, no? On our present incarnation. So that's therefore if someone did the only good deeds while he were here on earth, he will have a better situation after in the spiritual realm, right? Well, after we die. And the opposite is true also. Right? If we do evil deeds here, and then we will have bad consequences for us, and not only in the spiritual realm, right? But only in our future incarnation. So, therefore, in the second part of our heaven hell, we have many spirit in many situations. In some way, representing all that is scale, the hierarchical, the spiritual hierarchy, right? Which we see in the spirit book. So there we see the example of a happy spirit is I have shown that there are some examples of that, right, throughout the presentation that I did regarding this book. And there are happy spirits, there are average spirits who are not happy but is not doing bad, right? There. And we have we saw example of earthly expiation, and today we are going to see three more examples of earthly expiation. What does we mean by earthly expiation? Is a situation where in our past incarnation we did something that was not good. Then after we died, we went to the spiritual realm. Then there we reflect about what we have did in the previous incarnation. And then we decided that in the next incarnation I will do something to repair, right, the wrong that I did in the previous incarnation. And then we have a situation, right, of a person who comes with, for example, with physical disabilities or mental disabilities, already being born with that, right? So how can we explain that, right? How can we explain a situation of a person who comes and is a good person, try to do everything in correctly, but nothing go right to him or her, right? Everything goes bad. Why is that, right? So these example of earthly patients show us why, right? So that's what we are going to see here. The first example is this guy here, right? Joseph Matry. Right? He was a blind man. Right? In the last incarnation, he was a blind man. Then, after he died, then he is evoked, and then he described, right, why he was in that condition of a blind man. Right? So this Joseph Matthew here, he belonged to the middle class of society, enjoyed a modest income that protected him from need. So he had a modest life, but having uh, no was not subject to starvation, for example, right? So, but what happened is that at the age of 20, he lost his sight. And by the age of 40, 20 years later, he was struck with a second infirmity that left him completely deaf. So by the age of 40, he was blind and deaf, right? And he died in 1845 when he was almost 50 years old, right? And so the question arises here, right? He was a good man, right? So what could he have done to deserve such a cruel fate, right? To become blind and then deaf, right? It wasn't his last existence while he was incarnate, right? Because he had always displayed exemplary conduct. He was a good man. And while he was here incarnate, nobody ever heard him utter a single complaint of his situation. And his speech displayed perfect lucidity and uncommon intelligence. So that is the enigma that we have here, right? So then he was evoked, and the following communication was received in response to the question addressed to him, right? So then he said, well, it was the second time that I was deprived of sight. So he was not only being blind in that previous incarnation, but also in the second incarnation before. Right? And then he said that during my previous existence, at the beginning of the last century, it means the third incarnation before his situation as a spirit, and by the beginning of the last century, which means Kardec is in the 19th century, so we are talking here about the beginning of 18th century. It was somewhere between, let's say, 1701, 1705, right? 05, the year 1705. And in that incarnation, uh, he went blind. Well, in the previous incarnation, he at the beginning of the last century, which is the beginning of the 18th century, he went blind at 30 years. 30 years due to excesses of all kinds. So in that second incarnation before he was there in the spiritual realm, he had going through many kind of excesses. Well, we can think about, let's say, looking like pleasure, being an egoist, drinking, having all kind of vices. And then he became blind at 30 years, right? So then he passed away in that second incarnation before, and then he went to the spiritual realm. And then instead of recognizing what he did, he blasphemed against God, right? He denied and accused God by saying that he must be unjust for making his creatures suffer as he did, right? And then, after realizing that his healing was impossible, well, he was still alive, right? He went blind, and then he blasphemed against God. And then, when he realized that such blindness would not be cured anymore, then he decided to commit suicide. So this was two incarnations before, right? Then, upon awakening on the spiritual realm, he found himself immersed in the same darkness he had been during life. So that is interesting here, because what he's saying here, that he was blind that second incarnation before, and when he died and through suicide, and he, he, he went to the spiritual realm, and in the spiritual realm, he was still blind. So that's what he's saying here. So it's interesting. The spirit is blind also in the spiritual realm. And then he understood that a higher power was weighing down on him. And if it's such a higher power could oppress him with such suffering, it could also comfort him. So he begged for mercy, and as he prayed, the light finally dawned. Uh, what does he mean by the light finally dawned? It means that in the spiritual realm, then the vision came again, right? So he would not be blind anymore, and his happiness was boundless, right? And to prove the sincerity of the repentance and good sentiments, then he returned to earth under the condition we were aware of, meaning that in the last incarnation, then he went and faced blindness again. So that's what happened, right? So after he died, he says, "I completed my expiation, but I must still make a reparation and hope to start a new existence where I can be useful to others." So that's interesting here, right? Because he had one existence where he went through all kind of excesses. Then he became blind in that existence. Then he rebelled against God, and he decided to commit suicide. Then he went to the spiritual realm. Then there he realized what he had done, and then he decided to come again. Then the second incarnation, right? Now the more the last incarnation. Then he became blind and deaf, right, in that incarnation. Two, that's a kind of expiation that he still had to overcome. And but then he now, after he died, he's now in the spiritual realm, and he's planning his next incarnation. And in his next incarnation, of course, he would not be facing any more blindness or deafness, right? He will try to do good deeds in order to repair he didn't done in the past. So that's the situation here. So uh, that's why it's an earthly expiation. Right? Second example is this Charles de Saint G. Right? Is a mental. He was mentally impaired. Right? So um, and he was a 13-year-old boy who was still living by the time he was evoked. Well, that's interesting also here, because we can evoke not only a dead person, right? A person that had already passed away, but he can evoke also the spirit of a living person, which is the case here. He's his boy who was impaired, right? 13 years boy. His intellectual faculties were so impaired that he could not even recognize his own parents. He could not recognize his father or mother. He could barely feed himself, right? So someone who should needed to give him the food, right? And had experienced the complete development suspension of his entire organic system. So you can imagine a person who is almost incompletely paralyzed, right? So cannot walk, cannot move, cannot feed himself, and mentally totally impaired, right? So, and what is interesting that he was evoked as if we were evoking Kardec saying we were evoking a spirit of a deceased person because he was still alive, right? So what is interesting here is Kardec wants to show us is that if we see a mentally impaired person now, in someone that we know, we must have in mind that the person cannot manifest or express normally as we. But the spirit, it does not mean that the spirit is mentally impaired. The spirit can be have normal faculties, but the body, which is does not allow the spirit to manifest normally, because there is some problem in the body, right? In the corporeal part of the being. So what this spirit said, or this young boy says, no? He said that he felt himself as a poor spirit held to the earth like a bird tied down by one leg, right? So like he was in a prison, right? Meaning his body was the same as a prison for his spirit. And his previous existence was that of a young libertine during the reign of Henry III, which was in the 16th century, right? And he said that as a spirit, for example, at that moment that he's being invoked, he can see and hear as a spirit, but his body cannot understand nor perceive anything. Right? So that's the situation here. And then what Kardec comments here is that this evocation demonstrates that regardless of the physical organs, the spirit enjoys all of its faculties. So that's very important for us to have in mind, right? Because, for example, today we have the problem, for example, of autism, right, in children. And children who have autism, he are, he are kind of departed from our normal world, right? So it's like he lived in, the child live in a personal world, right? So he had many difficulties to communicate with the other person, right? And also they have that repeat the action, right, that they have. So that's what we see as incarnate. But what we important to have in mind is that the spirit that is on that child is not is not in that condition, right? The spirit can like you in the case of here, can hear, can think, can communicate, but the body cannot do that, right? So that's something important to us to have in mind. So that's why the imperfection of the organs is only an obstacle to the free manifestation of the spirit, right? Of thought. So that is something interesting to learn here. Um, then a spirit is a more evolved spirit, of course, right? A superior spirit um, communicate to Kardec and to the Parisian Society a teaching about the mentally impaired. So what his highly evolved spirit says is that mentally impaired persons are being punished for having used their powerful mental factors badly. So meaning that, for example, This boy here, Charles de Saint-G, surely he's a very intelligent spirit, right? So, but it's such intelligence he used in a previous incarnation badly, right? So, to do evil and not good. So then um, that's why he now comes mentally impaired, right? Because if he would come again as intelligent as he was in his previous incarnation, he would have a strong tendency to repeat it all over again, and then he would not progress. Right? So that's the reason why he come in this situation. And what's interesting also that this is often chosen by the spirit, the trial, right? Chosen when he was there on the spiritual realm, right? Before incarnate as this his mentally impaired boy, and is chosen as a trial by repentant spirits who wants to redeem their wrongs, right? Which is the case of Charles, this Sanji. And they have two personalities, right? The one that is delirious, which is the incarnate person, and the one is that is aware of its acts without being able to control them, which is the spirit, right? And nothing occurs without a cause. And what we might call an injustice of a fate is only an application of the highest justice, divine justice of God. So that's what we can learn from this example here. And now the last example here that we have is this woman here, Adelaide Marguerite Ghost. Adelaide Marguerite Ghost, a French woman. Right? She was a poor, humble, and maid from Normandy in France. So at 11 years of age, this woman, she went to work for some healthy ranchers. Right? And some years later, the Seine River, which passed through Paris, right, flooded and drowned all their animals. And the girls' employers fell into poverty. And what does this woman did, right? So, what did this woman do, right? So she convinced his employers to accept 500 francs she had saved up, and she continued to work for them without pay because they could not pay her for her service, right? And after her employers died, she devoted herself to their daughter, the daughter of her employers, right? And her sublime self-denial lasted for nearly a half century. And then, at the end of her life, an attack for paralysis took her from the earth suddenly and painlessly. And then she was evoked at the Parisian Society, which was uh, um, coordinated by Allan Kardec on December 27th, 1861. And then she says, no, her situation. She said that for successive existence, so two existences before the last one, where she was a humble maid, and the previous two existences before that, she was a very healthy person, right? She occupied a high level position, she says, and it was easy for her to practice the good without sacrifice because she was a wealthy person, right? And then she realized that she was evolving too slowly, right? And then she asked to return in a humble condition, to struggle with privation. So it's what the last incarnation, her last incarnation. And then she said that God upheld her courage, and so she was able to reach her intended goal, thanks to the spiritual assistance God gave her. Right? And regarding her former employers, his last incarnation, she said she chose them to pay off a debt of gratitude, because in a former life, in the life before, where she was a wealthy person, they had been kind toward her and had rendered her service. So it means that it's interesting here because what she's saying here that her employers in her last incarnation, in the incarnation before, she was her employer, right? So the situation was the opposite here. But then we can see here something interesting here. also because the spirit, according to the free will, uh, we we all want to progress, right? But sometimes we feel that we are progressing too slowly, and we want to fasten our progress, right? Our pace of progress. Can we do that? We can. So that is the example of Adelaide Marguerite Ghost, right? So she decided to come in a very different situation, right? Because she was a wealthy person in two incarnations. Then she decided to come to being born as a humble person, right? In order to evolve faster. So that was her intention, and she succeeded on that, right? So that is the three examples, interesting example that I would like to bring today. So today, then we finalize the presentation of the Heaven and Hell, and the next book we are going to study is Genesis: Miracles and Predictions according to Spiritism. Right. So we'll see a couple of presentation, maybe starting June 18th, the next presentation, and then it will be the first presentation of the Genesis, where maybe probably we will talk about the genesis of the universe, and then we'll go on with the spiritual genesis, organic genesis, spiritual fluids, and go and so on and so forth. And maybe we take that until November or December. We finalize that. Okay. So thank you to be with me today, and now I'm open to any question or comments you may have. Esteban?
Wonderful, my friend. Very good. Very good. It's good to see how you flow
Mhm.
around the topic. It is important to make sure everyone is aware of what Kardec wrote about the angels, the demons, the
Yeah.
existence, what is it. So this kind of put a well defined um, explanation
Mm.
for this.
Yeah.
Um, I think we don't have any question.
Mm.
Just the presence of Igor Lazarin. Louvier, it is with us.
Igor is here from FESP.
Oh, good, good. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so would you mind to do the? We didn't do the initial prayer because it was we were
Mm.
tight at the time. But can you do the final prayer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good.
Well, let's then finish our presentation today, our meeting, thanking God for this opportunity to talk. And at the end of the day, we have been talking about God's divine laws and what He such laws apply to our life. And also, we are going to thanks to the spiritual benefactors, to all the support and throughout our studies of this book, and finally to Jesus by this opportunity to be being reunited here in His name. Let Him allow us to go on our study of this of Spiritism in order to better understand the meaning of our life and the purpose of our lives. So be it.
Amen. Okay, my friends.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you to ESP again. Thank you, Cardiac Radio. And if you have any questions, please send over to us and we pass along to Roberto, and he gladly will answer anything you may need. Okay? Thank you, my friends. Have a nice evening or afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.